understanding. That's the original meaning of fiqh. And the meaning of fiqh in this context, the technical terminological meaning of fiqh, the meaning of fiqh in the context of our discussion, is the deriving of laws and of the teachings of the Quran and Hadith from the primary sources. Inshallah, we'll understand more as we discuss for the next hour or so. But fiqh literally means understanding. And here it means, you may have heard various translations of the word fiqh. Fiqh can be translated as being Islamic law, the understanding of the primary sources of Islam, of the Quran and Hadith. Fiqh has also been translated as jurisprudence. All of these meanings are valid. And the meaning that I wish to convey of fiqh today, in the context of our discussion, the role of fiqh in understanding the Quran and Hadith, is as follows. That we cannot simply understand the Hadith directly or the Quran directly without resorting to various means, mechanisms, methods, and even without referring to the understanding and the interpretation of other people, all the way from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum till today. Now let's look at the Holy Quran itself. Even more than the Hadith, Muslims agree that the Quran is the foundation, the fountainhead, the springhead, the origin, the source of our religion. No one doubts or disputes that. But how do we actually read and understand the Hadith, the Quran, just the Quran? There are those who sadly detach the Hadith from the Quran and they refuse to accept the validity of the Hadith. They refuse to accept that the Hadith is a primary source in Islam, in religion. And they argue that the Quran must be read alone and understood alone, and only the Quran can tell you what's actually halal and haram in Islam, what's actually obligatory or optional in Islam. And we often hear arguments being made and the evidence being put forth that, does the Quran say anything about this? No, the Quran doesn't say anything about this, but the Hadith do. In that case, we don't accept. It's only haram if the Quran says it's haram. It's only halal if the Quran says it's halal. It's only obligatory if the Quran says it's obligatory. And sadly, this trend is actually on the rise. And more people are arguing, obviously there are various influences, but more and more people are arguing that we should detach anything else from the Quran, and only the Quran should be taken as a primary source of understanding and applying religion. But even this is fundamentally flawed. It's an inherently weak argument. In fact, it's self-defeating. Because that would reduce most of religion to something which is absolutely meaningless. Allow me to explain. The very people who say that we shouldn't accept the Hadith, we should just rely on the Quran, the truth is, they themselves cannot constitute their religion. They cannot build up their own religion as they practice it from the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to pray. But the manner and method of prayer are not contained in the Quran. They are not. In fact, quite clearly and categorically, without any ambiguity, it's very, very difficult to even establish the obligation of the 5 prayers from the Holy Quran and their timings. Nowhere in the entire Quran does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stipulate 5 prayers. Nowhere in the entire Quran. The word 5 is never mentioned in conjunction with the word prayer or even in the context of prayer. None whatsoever. The timings of prayer without ambiguity, clearly and categorically, are not established from the Holy Quran. And I say that because some of the ulama may be wondering that no, there are some verses that speak about the timings of prayer. But the truth is, I did say without ambiguity, without reservation, without dispute. The reason is because those verses that speak about the times of prayer, some ulama actually say, because the wording is not very clear. There is no wording in the Quran that you must pray Maghrib Salah at sunset. You must pray Fajr Salah between the crack of dawn and sunrise. You must pray Dhuhr Salah afternoon till the beginning of Maghrib time, or the beginning of Asr time. There is no such mention in the entire Quran. And therefore, it's still ambiguous. It's still unclear to some extent. This is for those people who argue that the Quran should alone be a source of understanding and application. So let's just take the first fundamental of religion, prayer. Even the prayer, of course, there's a general obligation of prayer. But the times of prayer, the manner of prayer, the timings, the style of prayer, the form and the mode of prayer, none of these are mentioned anywhere in the Quran. The 4 raka'at, how many raka'at do you pray? What do you pray in each raka'at? How do you pray? None of this is established. So, the most you learn from the Holy Quran categorically, without ambiguity, is that established prayer. And trust me, there will come a time when people will say, indeed, the Quran doesn't tell you how you have to actually pray. The Quran only says you should pray. And salah, the word salah, originally just meant supplication or prayer. And prayer can be in any form. You could raise your hands and pray to Allah. You could whisper a few words and pray to Allah. You could silently meditate at the end of the day and pray to Allah. You don't have to actually go through this ritual and this motion of rising, standing, reciting, bowing, prostrating. You don't have to go through that whole ritual. So where does it say in the Quran that you have to actually read salah in this manner? Trust me, a time will come, is going to come. And we are already seeing signs of this when people will begin to argue that there is no such thing as namaz, as salah. As we understand it in the Quran, this is a later innovation, and the truth is we will be fulfilling the obligation of prayer by any method, even though it may simply be silently meditating at the end of the day, lowering your head, talking to Allah, whispering a few words, or even silent meditation. And the obligation of salah, which originally means, even linguistically means, simply prayer, will have been fulfilled and accomplished. So you cannot even get salah from the Holy Quran. The Quran tells us, every Muslim knows about the obligation of remaining pure. But even before wudu, the complete obligation of remaining in the state of purity and performing ghusl, as we know it, we do not understand from the Holy Quran. The words are mentioned for tahuru, be extremely pure, but the manner in which that purification is to be achieved, even before prayer, cannot be unambiguously and categorically, undisputably established from the Holy Quran. Same with zakah, same with hajj. A few laws are mentioned. Same with fasting. A few laws are mentioned. So, it's surprising that the people who argue that the Quran should alone be a source of understanding and application of religion.